November 1st, 2015. You're looking at the January issue of The Economist magazine. Many say it's an Illuminati-controlled publication. But in January, they'll put out an issue, and it's called The World in 2015 this year. And it's supposed to be things that are going on across the planet for the entire year. You see the world leaders across the front here, from all the way from Putin, Merkel, Obama, the Chinese, the Hindu, the Indian Prime Minister Cameron, with Churchill in the back with the nuclear explosion over that. But we've watched this and done many videos over the year about this. Even when China, which you see represented by the panda bear, and to the back left is a panic situation. It's their currency. When they devaluated it, created a panic in the stock market. Billions were lost. But in the bottom right, you see Alice in Wonderland standing next to a portrait. But there are two eras that are dated November 5th, November 3rd. They have sand there representing a body of land. There's two cracks that emanate under this race car and through that marble floor from those two eras. Now, the lady in the picture is supposedly what they call La Bella Veronese by Leonardo da Vinci. She was either Lucretia Gravella or Beatrice d'Este. Now, either way, if they're implicating an area on the earth, they were both from Milan, Italy. Now, you see the two eras there, and there's cracks that come under that race car from those arrow points. Is that November 5th, November 3rd? This is Milan, Italy. Are they talking about an area in the ocean? You see that off the coast? Now, remember the dates 11-3, 11-5. The Taurid meteor shower, which is in its 61-year cycle, is supposed to be peaking this year. We've seen larger asteroids, more fireballs, things like that. It's very interesting. I wanted to point that out. Is that what we've been seeing all year with those two arrows? It's just something to watch. Now, if you remember in the video, part 2, the scientists that had put together the book of what they thought had happened every 3,600 years, it starts with a few asteroids and maybe a couple comets, they said, striking the sun, which yesterday on Halloween we did. And again, just possibly coincidence. But it says that after a couple comets strike the sun that we would see intense solar flares. Now, we'll watch this again. Notice October, yesterday, 31st. Here comes your first comet into the camera at 9:36. There's one coming in. I've got it slowed down. You'll see the second one following it. Now, I know it's just coincidence that they put the scenario together from the evidence that they had seen. There's the other one coming in at 23:36. Notice that. Both hit the sun, and we are having extreme coronal mass ejections. You saw that in the first image. But again, it's just coincidence, I'm sure. But that's exactly how the video started, and I will show you the condensed version on that first chapter. Again, you see the coronal mass ejections. Again, that's mentioned in the book too. That's why we have not seen any earthquakes, because it's been relatively quiet. We have these that are side-glancing blows to our planet. But guys, we have a solar flare, a sunspot coming around that's capable of X flares now. I'll update that in the morning. But I want to go back to the book, The Cycle of Cosmic Catastrophes. It says, and it begins with meteors falling like raindrops. A few here and a few there, like we've seen on the reports coming in. Perhaps a few hit the sun, provoking large solar flares. You see what happened yesterday? The solar flares provoke colorful auroras even in the daytime sky. What they don't include is that they cause earthquakes, and you've seen enough of my videos to know that that's what happens. Now, I want to continue with the information in the book that they had from part 2. Remember, the sudden surge of the asteroids that came in through the atmosphere created a vacuum behind them, and cold air rushed in way below zero, instantly flash freezing even the mastodons. Remember, they were found frozen even with the food in their mouth that they were eating. It happened that fast. But it said pieces of flying debris, large and small, fell from the Atlantic to the Pacific, from the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic, from Europe to Asia, and even down to Africa. More than 1/4 of the planet was under siege. Remember the Carolina Bay images from the video yesterday? 500,000 impact craters on the East Coast. It says the impact through the glacier at Hudson Bay sent high-velocity meltwater surging under the ice sheet. The surges lifted and floated large ice sections of ice, causing monolithic ice blocks to slide southward along hundreds of miles of the ice front. Moving nearly as quickly as a horse is able to run, the blocks plowed over forest, shearing off the trees. You know they killed everything that was still alive after the almost nuclear blast of the incoming asteroids and comets. So the oceans, too, were targets. And that's because, remember when the impact hit the ice sheets in North America, how it scattered? Said thousands of ice chunks and clouds of slushy water hit the Atlantic, exploding with colossal detonations. The multiple concussions triggered immense underwater landslides off the Carolinas and Virginia, releasing thousands of cubic miles of mud. In turn, the mud unleashed a 1,000-foot-high tidal wave that raced towards Europe and Africa at 500 miles an hour. 9 hours later, the wave hit Europe, 1,000 feet tall at 400 miles per hour, probably taking some of the survivors of the very first explosions that came in from the asteroids and comets. It said the wave broke over hundreds of miles inland, devastating everything in its path. It says everything living on the coast was killed instantly. The momentum spent, the churning water paused briefly, began to recede, and sent a 100-foot wave back across the Atlantic to the U.S. coast. That's how devastating these events and how quickly that this world can be shaken. Now, nobody knows the time, but we're correlating a lot of information together. We're seeing a lot of things go down on this planet. We see Syria, Russia, Iran, Iraq, the U.S. mingling very near Armageddon. It's time to pay attention. Now, remember the events as they came in. You had asteroids and comets coming in, creating explosions. They create a vacuum behind them and allowed that cold air from the upper atmosphere to pour down at supersonic speeds, with super freezing everything very fast. But now, it said within minutes of the impacts, the sub-zero air and rising water vapor combined to produce heavy snow and sleet that reached as far south as Mexico, the Caribbean, and northern Africa. In the south, the snow turned to rain, and the northern hemisphere was under a steady downpour for months. Downpours of noxious water, contaminated and deadly. The melted water of the glaciers had another effect, flooding into North America. It turned off that ocean conveyor that we've talked about with the melting ice caps that brings the warmer water to the northern climates. Once shut off, coupled with the clouds of dust blocking the sun, the temperature fell drastically. Within days or weeks after the impacts, continental temperatures fell well below freezing, and a brutal ice age chill once again spread across the land, remaining in place for another 1,000 years. And guys, this is a book that was put together again by a group of scientists putting all the data together. But what in history, and I mentioned this, what in history points to this? 12,600 years ago, the Indians in South Carolina, if I may not pronounce it right, the Algonquin Indians tell a story that say it's the oldest of their people. In it, the Great Spirit warned that a star would fall, and the people who listened hid themselves in deep mud, and then an object appeared in the sky. Now, back to the deep mud part. In the book the scientists read or wrote, they said that would be the only surviving creatures. An object appeared in the sky as bright as a second sun, with a long glowing tail that enveloped the earth. Trees burned, lakes and rivers boiled, rocks shattered. After the star climbed back into the sky, now check this out, something came by. It was dragging a lot of debris. The main object went back up. Now again, the star had went back into the sky. The people emerged to find their whole world completely changed. The giant animals had died, leaving only their bones. said the Great Spirit warned that the long-tailed heavenly climbing star would someday return. Sounds like a comet. In this story, it says the bright object, again, sounds like a comet. It says that it was so hot it caused the ice to melt off the mountains, it caused rocks to melt, and it caused all the trees to catch on fire. It says if our orbit and the orbit of this object that we think hit us is coincided once, then the odds are extremely high that it would coincide again. Again, we're looking at a 3,600-year period, guys. It's coinciding with, again, the Taurid meteor shower, Gemini, Perseid, and Leonid are all associated with what they think was a giant comet around this time. But between 12,600, 12,900 years ago is when this was said to happen. Very interesting times we're living in. Remember, November 4th and 5th is the peak of about a 2-week time through the Taurid meteor shower we're going through now.